Okay. Isabella just continued to throw her fit while Jonathan just sat there and looked on. Wasn't the first time he'd seen her with her feathers all ruffled, especially about a move. But today, this one was different because even Jonathan himself was a little concerned. See, Jonathan always thought he'd build his nest over in the big oak tree. That's a fine, sturdy place for a bird, for a dove to build his nest. But that all changed the night under the big olive tree. He was up there in that tree with Isabella, and the stars were glittering off the dew on the leaves, and the gentle breeze was blowing, rocking the two back and forth, and it was such a romantic, lovely night that Jonathan knelt down and proposed to Isabella. Oh, it was so magical. The tree, the olive tree, became a symbol of all their hopes and dreams and desires. And Isabella asked Jonathan, "Someday, Jonathan, I'd like to come back to this tree again. I'd like to come visit an olive tree again with you." And Jonathan said, "Isabella, sweetheart, not only will we visit olive trees, but I'll build you a nest in one." Well, there was wedding bells and rings exchanged and vows made, and now the two lovebirds set out to build their first home. But you know, as Jonathan prayed about it, he really felt like God wasn't leading him to build a nest in the olive tree yet. So he went ahead and built a nest in a gopher wood tree. Well, Isabella wasn't happy about this. She wanted her nest in the olive tree. But the two young lovebirds were so in love and everything that she didn't complain much. But as they had their nest built and everything was happy and everything was beautiful, there was no problems, there was no troubles, there was no difficulty, everything was perfect. Till someone come along and cut the tree down. One night, they began to feel a chop, chop, chop at the base of the tree. And the leaves began to shake, shake, shake. The old gopher wood tree began to sway to the left. And it swayed to the right. Finally, the big tree fell down with a timber. The couple barely escaped with all their things. They grabbed their stuff and flew away, and thankfully there was another big gopher wood tree nearby. So they put their things in there and they began to get everything back in order, and they just had it all together, and they got all the boxes unpacked and the suitcases put away, and they started inviting people over, making friends, and reestablishing their lives again. And then Jonathan seen two men walking into the forest with big old axes. He flew to tell Isabella, "We've got to move." But Isabella didn't want to move. And she started to complain. She complained that she had been so understanding through all the moves and not building the olive tree yet. And she complained that the robins down the street had never had to move yet. And she complained that if they continued all this moving, they'd never be able to start a family. And she complained right through the sound of the chop, chop, chopping of the tree. And she complained through the shake, 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 shaking of the leaves. And she complained through all the oak trees sway to the left and sway to the right. And she complained as the big oak tree fell with the timber. And Isabella and Jonathan grabbed their things and flew away. This time they had to stay with some friends. And they put all their stuff in storage. And they were very sad. And Jonathan flew away trying to find out where the new couple could build a house. This time it had to be permanent. And he flew around, and that's when he seen it. It was an enormous, enormous ark. There had been a legend for over 100 years of a man named Noah building an ark. But nobody really believed it. Yet now, as Jonathan looked on at that magnificent ship, not only was it believable, not only was it true, but it was an understatement. Everything that he had heard didn't compare to this big ark. Jonathan knew that this time where he built it had to be God's will. Because it surely couldn't be God's will for them to fly around here and there in disarray. So he flew back to tell Isabella he found a place for the house. And Isabella wasn't happy. She didn't understand why Jonathan was carrying on about some big old ship instead of going and finding them a place to live, maybe even in the olive tree. But he was so excited, she agreed to fly out with him and see it. And he was right, it was an enormous boat. But the thing was, not only were they coming to see it, but there was animals everywhere. Lions and giraffes and turtles and elephants and dogs and mice. Everybody was coming to the ark, 2 by 2. So Isabella agreed, and they gathered their stuff and flew onto the ark. And there was cages everywhere, so they found a little nest up near the top of the ark. And they settled in. But Isabella wasn't happy, and she began to complain much. Oh, this place is stinky. Oh, this place is too cramped. There's too many animals. What are we going to do? Isabella complained even though it started raining. And Isabella kept on complaining right through the boat actually floating. And Isabella complained through the chop, 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 chopping of the waves. And Isabella complained right through the shake, shake, shaking of the timbers. And Isabella complained as the old boat began to rock to the left and rock to the right. But you know what? The boat didn't sink. The boat just kept right on floating. Finally, after 40 days, Isabella had to catch her breath, and everyone realized it stopped raining. But then she started complaining again. She complained for over 140 days. And then Noah lifted up the ark, and he let out a raven. And when he did, Isabella could see water everywhere. And she began to think how blessed they were to be on the ark. What if in the beginning they had built their house in the big olive tree? Would they have been too happy and content to leave and build their nest on the ark? Maybe God would have found a different pair of doves to put on the ark. But God loved them too much for that. And he made sure the doves were on the ark where they had to be, even though they had to go through all the trials. Well, the raven just kept flying around back and forth over the water. So Noah goes in and grabs out Jonathan from the cage and takes him to the window. And normally this would have scared Isabella very badly. But somehow through all her troubles and trials, she'd learned to trust God. So Jonathan was let loose and he flew around and he returned to the ark. with an olive leaf in his mouth. Noah put him back in the boat, and he presented his prize to his bride. And later, a couple days later, Noah takes Jonathan out again, and he flies away. But Isabella wasn't concerned. She knew where to find Jonathan. Just look for the biggest olive tree around.